Welcome to the Precision Teaching Podcast. My name is Rick Cabina, and today I'm joined by Doug Kostowitz.
That's me.
And Carrie Millico.
How's it going?
Our usual co-host, Sean Datchick, cannot join us tonight because he has the unfortunate or fortunate, however you look at it, event of having Jazz Fest in his backyard. And apparently that's a pretty big deal down there in New Orleans. And at the time of our taping, Jazz Fest is in full swing, so all we would hear is a bunch of music.
Not like that's a bad thing.
I was going to say, some might argue that might not be a bad thing to hear that instead of us, right?
Possibly. So here we are. This is our kind of semi-welcome back show. I looked, and the last time we spoke was June 30th, 2012, and due to different events, namely Doug not being able to figure out how to turn his computer on again, it took us a while to get back. But here we are, and we have a commitment to talk every single month and bring lots of informative information, I guess, would be redundant, but interesting information.
There you go.
And good interviews, good news stories, and everything precision teaching. So let's start off by, we're welcoming, this is kind of our welcome back for a little brief respite. And I guess we have a recap we can do. Since our last podcast was June 30th, a lot has happened in that time. So why don't we talk about a few of those events? My list, I have a few things. Perhaps one of the biggest things was the International Precision Teaching Conference, which was, that was, when was that? December 2012. And yep. I don't know about you two, but I thought it was a smashing success.
I think that was the best one that I've ever attended.
I thoroughly agree. I thoroughly agree. I thought Sarah was actually going to go into a lot more depth. She had.
Oh, sorry. I'm trying not to hog the microphone here.
That's all right. You had a lot of good things to say at the conference. I thought you were going to enlighten us on some of those things as well. I actually had a great time. It was a great venue. Chicago is one of my personal favorite cities to go to conferences. So that setting was great. And I thought the hotel was perfect for us. And I saw a lot of energy going around. So I felt it. I saw it. And I'm looking forward to the next Precision Teaching Conference in
St. Pete.
There you go.
Yeah, I think, for me, I always feel the energy at the PT conferences, so that was a constant in this, but I think that at least the talks that I went to were just of a different caliber this year. I thought that they were more intriguing and informative and more kind of new and out of the box thinking of techniques and really just passionate speakers, and Julie killed it. And then it was great to hear Mal and Chuck as well. We don't really get to hear them speak that often, so I was, I learned so much from the PT conference, and I love it when I can attend a conference and walk away, with gobs of new information about how I'm going to change things the next work day that, I enter my office and our procedures and stuff, where sometimes I go to ABA and I sit and talk and it sounds good, or there's this big name and I'm just like, okay, well, that was a waste. Maybe at least I got a CEU, but not that I know everything, but it was just like not what I thought it was going to be, and the title threw me off for a loop, or or if, the speaker wasn't really passionate about it, so then your focus kind of drifts. But I didn't have any of that happen at the PT conference. So for me, it was just a nice weekend of not only fellowship with my fellow colleagues, but just a weekend of learning, which I enjoy.
That's a good recap. And for those who didn't attend the conference this year, Terry was referring to Julie Vargas, who was our keynote speaker, who delivered an absolutely fabulous presentation talking about precision teaching, its roots, and how it's how it fits in with behavior analysis. Malcolm Neely is one of the founders of one of the veteran precision teachers, I should say, and Chuck Merbitz is another one of our veteran folks who was awarded who's one of our guest speakers. And all three of those, along with all of the other people, it was a remarkable conference.
It was. And Mal got the Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yes.
This year. Mm-hmm.
Another interesting thing that happened was I've noticed that the pages on Facebook, for those of you who are on Facebook, have seemed to have overtaken the listserv. So a lot of you may be on the listserv, but I haven't really seen. I've been monitoring the traffic on the listserv, and it seems to have decelerated to an all-time low, considering there are well over 300 members on there. But yet on Facebook, there are a few different groups, and the discussion seems to have moved over there.
That would be nice to see on a chart. It would be really interesting for someone to post that up on Chart Share, whoever has time to go back and look at the frequency of posts. But yeah, I noticed a similar trend. I was like, wow, the list is really quiet, but I didn't even think about how it relates to the activity on the Facebook page. And yep, you're right. We've been having some really cool discussions on the Facebook page.
I wish there was
What's Facebook? Yeah. Hello, caveman.
That's right.
I wish there was some way of being able. Well, I guess you could with the listserv. It's set up so that you can see I've been tracking the listserv members monthly, and I can also go back and share the frequency of the posts. But that'd be tough to do with Facebook because you'd have to actually go back and keep counting everyone and just be a pain in the butt.
It would be annoying, yeah, no doubt. But it'd be cool to see if anyone has that free time on their hands.
Well, the social media, the social media and precision teaching is really expanding its reach, and I think that contributed to the large numbers at the last conference. There were just so many students there, more than I had ever seen before, and that, of course, whenever you have a group of people that are excited and they want to learn, that just adds to the atmosphere, which I think we all picked up on.
The next step that I have been starting to investigate is bringing our conference on to live streaming. So for that large group that are overseas, I mean they're relatively large, but I know that Morton Hoagland has a lot of people out there that he works with that never have an opportunity to come to our conferences, or for those people who live on the other coast and can't make the flight or can't afford another conference on their yearly budget, getting a discounted rate of something where you can attend the conference via streaming of some sort would be really cool.
So that could be another new thing that's happening. Doug, we have the journal is up to, we have up to 2011 is where we are.
So the most recent issue is 2011. 2012 is in progress to be I'm waiting for some things to come in, but I'm always looking for any submissions. You can send it to me. I don't know, do you publish my email, or you can go to celebration.org, and my email is under the journal. You can contact me, even if you have some ideas, questions, see if things are appropriate for the journal. Please send me some data. Send me a chart. And
yeah, unfortunately, that's one of the things that really hasn't changed is there's still a problem with people submitting articles. And this is something that has been around with precision teaching. I mean, this isn't a recent phenomenon. It's just that a lot of people are practitioners that do precision teaching, not academics, and therefore they don't publish. And as a result, the journal suffers from a lack of those great ideas that happen out there every day in the classroom and the tutoring centers and wherever people are doing PT.
And the option of the chart share is a really nice way to just, you share a chart and you get to talk about it. So it's not that same level of rigor that's associated with the conventions of a traditional research article. This is a situation where you just share the chart as though you're talking about it. And that can go back and forth, and it's always nice to have your name up in lights and people will talk about what's going on. I mean, that's the backbone of precision teaching. So many people sharing what kids, how they're behaving, what they're doing, and to see that over time, different techniques, and to see the same thing happening with different kids over different in different situations. That's how that research has been built in the past. So please, if you have a chart, you can share it. Especially, it doesn't have to be amazingly interesting, but it might not be interesting to you, but it might be really interesting to other people.
Yeah.
Okay. Good point. Another piece of information is with, I suppose this isn't big precision teaching information, but it could be. Our absent colleague has recently been offered a job at the University of Vermont. We congratulate you, Sean. And it's always good filling the ranks of colleges and universities with precision teaching professors because I mean, we need people everywhere, but certainly we need to keep filling the halls of academia with people that can reach out directly to students. And that's always good. And, of course, I guess the last thing before we go on, and Doug already mentioned this, that we have plans underway for the Precision Teaching Conference in December 5th, 6th, and 7th. That will be in beautiful St. Pete, and you'll be hearing more about that. But please, if you're on Facebook, you can check that out. You can make your room reservations already. We have phenomenal rates of $104. We anticipate that this conference will be as awesome or more than the last one.
Yeah,
sounds good.
So there we have
hopefully people will actually attend the conference and not be on the beach.
Right. Well, that's our news update. Let's move on to our question. We have an email question from Ron in Toledo who asks, how does precision teaching fit into the new age of people self-tracking weight, fitness, and other improvement goals? Ron in Toledo, that is a fabulous question.
It is.
Let me ask you two this. How many apps do you have, or do you have apps where you do any of these things? Do you have any apps that you use for fitness or your diet?
The question is, do you use the app that you have?
I do. I do.
That's an appropriate question for me.
It was a little late, but I received for Christmas the Fitbit 1, which I wear a receiver. It's Bluetooth to my iPhone 5. It keeps track of my steps. It calculates how many miles I've traveled, how many calories I've burned. It's just being awake, you burn calories, and then as you go over X number of steps, you can see how many you burn. Then that is coordinated on my phone with I have to enter the foods that I eat, the amount of water I drink, my weight each morning, and it does graph, not on a standard acceleration chart, but on it does keep graphs of different things, tracks my steps per day. I can set different goals. It sends me email reminders, but this is probably, I don't know if some of you have used what's that one that I used to use, Rick?
Lose It?
Lose It. So
Lose It. Yeah, that's the one I have.
This is Lose It on steroids.
It sounds like it.
And it's been a lot of fun. I've drawn now. Of course, I got it for Christmas, so that means I just opened it up about 2 weeks ago. That was mostly with the prompting of family members that bought it for me, namely my wife. But in the last 2 weeks, I've already dropped like 6 pounds. So
awesome.
That side of things, yes, I do use them, and it's been effective. Now, that's not addressing specifically the question here. Carrie, do you have anything to add about the things that you use?
I have Lose It, and then I also have Runkeeper for that one crazy time of my life when I thought that I should start running. And I was doing it allows you to set like a walk and a run time for us people who do not run, and then are you going to have your goal be based on miles or based on time? That was kind of PT, like that was exciting. So it's like, oh, like a fixed timing or a variable interval timing, and then it hooks up with your iTunes library, which is nice because I swear if I hear myself breathing when I run, then I instantly stop. And then and it gives you little notices like, if you run 2 minutes and walk 1 minute, you have this nice, calm, soothing voice saying, oh, 1 minute walk, and then beep, 2 minutes run, which is cool. So it allows you to kind of freely behave as opposed to looking at your own watch or your phone. And then it, too, gives you an output based on how fast your mile, like your average mile was, and then your total time and your total mileage, or it can be kilometers. And what I would do during that brief period as I used this was then I would then chart on an SCC, and I had 2 charts. I didn't know if I wanted to do kilometers or miles, and then I had like different phases of, this is when I would 1 minute walk, 1 minute run, 1 minute, and then when I increased the duration of my running to like walk 1 minute, run 2 minutes, and stuff like that. Yeah, and then this was obvious. This was when I had more time, pre-baby. So.
Well, I think until there's some kind of, so getting back to the original question, I think until there gets to be some kind of app that can be tied to the chart, you're going to be forced to, you'll get the data, and it'll be up to you to plot it either on some kind of Excel chart or drop it yourself. But, it was just amazing talking about getting that data much easier and then plotting. I remember when we were in Denver, Kenny Packer did that chart share of his steps, and it showed on there. I thought that was pretty awesome. Pretty awesome, because then he moved from a daily chart to a weekly chart to a monthly chart, and it was great how it just flatlined. It just all the variability was gone across the chart. It just balanced all out. But anyway, I think
But
using those aims, that would be awesome. I think a common aim for everybody is 10,000 steps a day. That's just everything seems to be set to 10,000 steps. So you can shoot for that every day. I think all those additional
calories if you want to lose weight.
Right, and those extra timings for running. Now I'm not a runner. I did enough running when I was younger, so now I do walking. I'll walk maybe 2 miles at a clip, which will really boost my steps. Although I didn't walk today, I'm already up to 14,000 steps. So I guess garage sales worked real well.
Yes.
But yeah, I think until there's that final step of it automatically translating into, you're going to be left to so you can gather this data a lot easier with these apps, and it will inform what you're doing. But until there's that next step, you're going to still be forced to that one level of translation of, I've got it on this one, I've got to go over here and do this, and then I've got to make my decisions based on that chart. Here, once it's on some kind of app, it'll be awesome. It'll just be awesome to see that data.
And even though that little step really is little, because how long does it take you to drop one dot? But it is a huge barrier because not a lot of people do it. So I
never took my caloric intake until I had something on my phone to do that. And so
and that's the cool thing about these apps.
Yeah.
I mean, even with
I was just going to say, I want them to get to the point where all I have to do is scan the UPC code, then I just enter servings. That's how bad I am. Decrease the response cost to that point.
And, well, you can scan the UPC code and get, like on Lose It, you can scan the code and it'll come up with all the nutritional stuff on it.
Well, maybe there's something on Fitbit that I haven't found yet.
Hey. Yeah, it's supposed to be on steroids, isn't it? But one of my grad students not my grad student, but a grad student who works with me was for a time thinking about doing a study. I'm not sure if she was going to use the chart, but it could definitely been thrown in there as an added variable. But she was going to look at using these apps in a way of effective weight loss and stuff like that. It's just such an easy tool for data collection.
Yeah, it's amazing. This question actually brings up a lot of issues. It gets at what's become known as life logging. Life logging has been around for a while, but people who do life logging now have so much more ease of doing it. And by the way, that term talks about people who have computers with them all the time to capture all of their lives or big portions of their lives. So I don't know if you two have heard of, I don't know how you say it, Memoto, is that what it is? But it's these little cameras that you wear, like Memoto, that's it. I think that's how you say it. And it's just always taking pictures. You could put on your belt. You could put it on, a lot of people wear it kind of on their, like right below their neck. And it's just really something else, that all the information that it gathers. There are, if you want to capture your heart rate, they're working on things for your galvanic skin responses, so your stress levels. All of this stuff is coming. But here's where precision teaching fits into it. We have a fundamental issue which is called pinpointing, and you need to be careful about looking at the difference between behavior and behavior output. So when we talk about behavior output, for example, calories, that's not a behavior, that's the result of a behavior. So Doug was talking about steps taken. You can chart how many steps you're taking, and then if you also want to correlate that with weight or whatever, that's okay, but you just have to be careful understanding that you're charting, what you're charting and how these things work together.
Sure.
You know what I see is go ahead.
No.
I was just going to say, what I see as the next step? Progressive has that thing they put in your car. It tracks how fast your car's going, and it can change your rate. They're going to get to a point where you're going to wear something, and you could probably get differing health insurance rates based on your activity level.
That'd be crazy.
That would be crazy.
Well, Doug, they already have that. They already have differential rates, which is based on social media. So people, people look at your social media and look at your lifestyles, and they're already giving differential rates based on the things you post, the things that you're doing. And
wow. Oh, man, that's a little too big brother for me.
Yeah.
No, you know what? That's why I don't live on Facebook.
Yeah. All right. Facebook now for me is all about my posting pictures of my baby.
Oh, well. So. All right. I thought it was a great question, getting back. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask or bring it back to Rick's point about pinpointing and watch out what you're actually charting, because I remember when I first started getting into PT, before I went into the route of education, I was introduced to behavior analysis via Hank Pennypacker. So all I knew about behavior analysis is that they use this funky blue chart. I didn't know about the Excel graphs or Java or JAB. All I thought was, okay, we put data on this funky blue chart, cool. And so I wanted to get into the dealing with people and health and wellness, more about like weight and anorexia, bulimia, blah, blah, blah. Took a different turn in life. But anyways, I was talking to Chuck Mervitz before. I think this was maybe my first ever conversation with Chuck Mervitz about doing a weight loss study. And he brought that exact point to my attention, is that, your weight is not a behavior. And it would look very strange on a chart. And it did, because I did that. And it was like, well, do you chart how much you weigh or how much you lose? And I was charting how much I lost, but it was just kind of like a flat line. You don't see it accelerating or decelerating. It's just like 2 pounds every week or something like that. So the chart didn't guide me so much in my decision making when I just charted the outcome as opposed to the behavior of exercise or something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think if you looked at the weekly chart, though, you might have looked at that a little bit differently. I wonder.
Well, you lose like 2 pounds a week, or like you can't look at it as a day, because you're right, there'd be nothing to chart unless you look at the ounces.
Right. Well, good question, Ron. It's as time moves forward, I'm sure all of us will be dealing with technology, and as technology continues to count things for us, it'll lend itself to being put on a chart, and if it's on a chart, we can make decisions, and it can undergo the full power of the standard acceleration chart and precision teaching. Well, we're moving on to education news, and we have a story that is not a fun story to talk about, but it's a story that is gaining incredible attention. And the story is about a cheating scandal that's in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia specifically. And this scandal is the reason why it's making such rounds and why everyone is paying attention to it is because it appears that this is the largest school cheating scheme ever in the history of the United States. And that has really caught people's attention. The story talks about how in Atlanta, the superintendent, what's her name, Hall, the superintendent was Hall, Beverly Hall. She's being brought up on corruption and racketeering charges. So corruption, that means you're somehow misusing public funds for your personal gain. And racketeering, that means that if you're running a racket, so if you think about gangsters and they say, hey, look, if you want to pay me some money for protection, then I'll make sure your store is protected, and implying that if you don't, then they will hurt you. So that's the racket, and that's racketeering. And corruption and racketeering are very serious charges. In fact, you probably heard the RICO Act, which is racketeering, something. And all of these things are being brought forward to this school system that was cheating. And the way they cheated is they would change scores. So the scores that every state has this, where you have to take some type of standardized test score, and that standardized test score, they're really important because they're tied very closely to state and federal funding. And of course, in some states, teacher bonuses are also linked to that funding. And this principal, this superintendent was viewed as just this remarkable person because over the period of the number of years, the Atlanta schools went from very poor to incredible, and here it turns out they were cheated.
Instead, it could date back even to 2001, but definitely between 2005 to 2009.
This is just a very sad story. We are concerned with education, and we have this thing that if people did it, you wouldn't have to cheat. Like,
I know, that's the most frustrating part of it all. What is it?
What I don't like, I'm sorry, what I don't like is how this will be phrased, and it's already starting to, you can hear the rumbling. If they wouldn't put this pressure to succeed, for accountability, then we wouldn't have these problems. And asking people to be held accountable for doing something, especially in these situations like, I don't know, how important is it to educate children? Asking that is not an unreasonable request. It's in the job description.
Sure.
Right? It's that you're supposed to be teaching kids, and you're supposed to be teaching them skills as they move forward. Our test scores are abhorrent. We are middle to low across the world. And, of course, we can sit here and say, if people would just do some more practice, i.e. systematic practice, i.e. Actually, that's not even correct, but that's okay. If they would do precision teaching, in addition to effective ways to get a skill to mastery through acquisition of mastery and then, boom, do practice. We know that these scores would come up without cheating, like Rick said. But what they don't like is they don't want to be held accountable for teaching kids to do things. And so they feel it's unfair, so you know what? You're going to do this to us, we're going to cheat. And that is such, it's a travesty. It's a travesty.
It is. And I would say, I feel you, I'm with you on that, but the contingencies that are in place in the school system don't make it a better situation for such reliance on one-shot test taking. They don't help the situation. The schools are run as a business, as a failing business.
If they were run as a business, they probably wouldn't have these problems.
No, but they're looking, we go to IEP meetings. Decisions are based not on whether or not the child needs the service, but whether or not the child is in the bottom 5% that they can actually afford to provide this service for this kid. So even though he still has speech and language issues, or even though, he can hold a pencil, but he's in, 6th grade and, Lord help him write a paragraph. Oh, no, but he's not going to receive any OT services or anything to help his handwriting. Fighting the system for that is a nightmare because they are told from the top down, your job will be threatened if you give any services. And so as advocates for these students, you have to fight tooth and nail to get them what they actually need. So while, I think, I'm in a position where I can fake data and be like, oh, yeah, look at this, give me more money because I'm so good at, improving your child's performance, I would never do that because it's not ethical. So while these people definitely were, out of bounds ethically, and it's a travesty, and it's, it's sickening that it actually got to that point, but the contingencies, the pressure doesn't help the situation.
What you're attacking, and I'm not disagreeing with you. You're attacking the small area, the kids in special education. Think about the kids in general education. Think about the skills.
Well,
yeah,
teachers, you have
one. I'm not even talking about the kids. I'm talking about the skills and techniques that are perpetuated to these teachers for the other 90% of kids. Those aren't the most effective.
I agree, and I would say that the percentage of kids in typical education is drastically decreasing because they're being shuffled off into a special ed because of ineffective instruction and lack of practice.
I don't know who said this, but that's a curriculum casualty, that they don't really have anything to do.
Amen, yes.
So the problem here is definitely cheating is wrong. I'm not going to doubt that. But the problem is, if they didn't cheat, those kids would still have horrible test scores. What's the problem? They're not being taught using the most effective methods that are available to them. Oh, I don't know. Rick, wasn't there like a study in like the 70s or something that really kind of put some light on real effective teaching methods?
This is a little one. This is a little funny.
I mean, the government spent a little bit of money on that one. Rick, maybe you want to elaborate real quick on that?
Sure. So Doug's talking about Project Follow Through, which look it up on the internet after we talk about it if you have never heard about it. But it was the most expensive educational experiment ever conducted, which clearly showed that explicit instruction, namely direct instruction was one of the models, was by far the winner when it comes to producing the highest degree of gain in basic skills, in social, effective with an A, feeling good about yourself. And what was the other category? It was effective. And cognitive skills.
Yeah. It was hands down. Now, that's something that, believe it or not, and Rick and I are both in academia. Carrie, you're not far removed from academia, but there are people who are coming in, that at least my colleagues that are in the sort of the general education area, they haven't even heard of that. Yeah. And they're new professors. They don't even know about it.
Mm-hmm. There was an article, I'm looking it up online, but I can't see it, but from like a Washington Post or something like that, like something, it was, I want to say, not an opinion piece, but anyways, it came out within the last 3 years, bringing back the talk about Project Follow Through and direct instruction. And it was like this guy stumbled upon it, and he was like, wait a minute, whoa. Wait a second, we've known this for 40 years, and we're not using this? What's the deal? What's that?
A lot of us haven't forgot it. So
that's true, yeah. But, I mean, it's not a lot. I mean, with respect to the people who are in education, there are some of us who haven't forgotten, but there is, apparently, I would say, at least the people who are in the position of power have forgotten or they don't know. And it was just interesting to think. I was searching for like a YouTube clip on construction when I was training some staff. I was like, oh man, I remember I saw a really good one day, and then up came this article, and the side was just like, why are we not doing this anymore? What's the deal? This is ridiculous. So I thought that was pretty cool.
This story of course, you're in our country, you're supposed to not judge people until they've had their day in court. But I can't help but prejudge the superintendent who's been accused of this. It wasn't just her, but there were 180 people that were involved in this. It wasn't just her. This alleged cheating, as you pointed out, Carrie, it is supposed to go back to 2001, but it also includes other administrators, which means principals, and a whole host of teachers. This shows one of the most epic fails, one of the most epic failures of character that I can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's really what it is.
It's just repugnant. That's the only thing I can say.
I've heard that there's investigations going on in other states as we speak. So this
I read something
prompted.
last week about D.C., and that broke my heart because I need to do more research into some, but it was during Michelle Reeve's reign in D.C., and after watching the documentary Waiting for Superman, I was a huge Michelle Reeve fan. But then I read that and I got sad. So hopefully this is hopefully this is not replicated in other areas. That would be
it is. Chicago, how many years ago was that, Rick, where it wasn't as epic as this, but they identified, I think, 10 teachers and they made a big deal about 10 doing this, and they got them. So,
and that was those as the teachers. I mean, this is 35 who were indicted. That's not 35 who participated, correct?
No. These were indicted. Yeah. I think I read when her bond was like $8 million. Unbelievable. I mean, this being taken very seriously, which as it should be. But I hope that the problem isn't, look at this, we're creating cheaters, so let's get rid of accountability. That's where
I agree.
I agree.
But let's maybe use one test out of the whole year to function as your measure for accountability.
Yeah, that's a whole other issue, but
that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, we got to wait for another question for that one. We can't just go off and
Can I write it?
No, you can't submit it, Carrie from
I can't submit
Florida.
questions?
No.
You could give it to one of your parents and have them do it.
Okay. Yeah.
If we see it, we'll say.
I've already written a couple blogs about standardized tests. I actually just wrote one this month.
So I've been trying to keep on top of this story, and the last I read was that in Georgia they have a professional standards commission, and so far that standards commission has revoked teaching permits of 67 of the teachers who were implicated in the scandal. And one of the reasons why they had to do it was because this May is when they have to make the decision whether to give people their contracts for the next year. And and the other thing that really kind of bothered me is when I was reading about this, although that's where they're at right now, some of the teachers have lost their certificates, so they were permanently revoked, but some of them were only barred for 2 years out of the classroom. And I was thinking, why didn't they revoke every single person who came up guilty? And if you're going to cheat like this, what does that say for you as a teacher? What it says is this is my take on it, that you care so little about those students that rather than expend the time to teach them, you focus your efforts on taking their test, going through and looking at their answers, erasing the wrong answer, filling in the right answer. That's how they catch these people, by the way, because these are done on these Scantron sheets. That's what you do as a teacher. You know what? You should be barred. It's like it would be a doctor, analogous to a doctor.
Take your dissertation data.
Yeah, it would be like conscious malpractice. It'd be like you're trying to repeatedly harm your students or your patients every single year. That's what these teachers are doing.
And you know what? They don't view it as they're harming. They're saying, we just need to get out of this whole testing thing. I'll get you a good score, so we'll do well, so we can go back to doing our fun stuff in the classroom. And, some of these teachers, as sick as this sounds, they think they care about their kids when they're doing this. They really do. Yeah, I had an example. I'll give you an example. I was in a school, and the situation was very much the same. Bad scores on tests. You know what? They didn't blame it on anything but, we had an off day that day before, so that's why everybody came back and got bad scores on tests. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's it comes down to this, and with kids in classrooms, they're using ineffective methods, and if those kids don't succeed, who do they blame? They blame the kid. They don't blame their method. Yeah. They don't blame. They don't make decisions. They're not. It's not suggested to them to do any sort of differentiation. And I mean, we can have arguments all around this issue, and it's troubling, especially when it comes to this level or any level where there's cheating involved. But I think we could have probably had this argument even if there was no cheating scandal going on, and still had the same argument. You know that?
Definitely.
So you got me a little fired up. So I'm going to simmer down here. So I'll let you.
Well, it's okay to be upset about this story. We believe every student deserves the highest order of instruction and effectiveness that we can possibly muster in the classroom. And that is our imperative in precision teaching. And we always are just feel deeply hurt when we see these types of stories where such cheating has occurred, because we know there's another way. Well, that's So that's our news story for today. Let's move on to our next segment, which is going to be happy. We have an interview with Dr. Julie Vargas, who just so happened to be the keynote speaker that Carrie was talking about earlier. And Dr. Vargas is the founder of the B.F. Skinner Foundation. In fact, she is B.F. Skinner's daughter. And she is one of the most radiant speakers that we have, and she is a precision teacher. She's a very good person, and this interview is very informative. So let's move on to the interview.
I would like to welcome Dr. Julie Vargas to the Precision Teaching Podcast. Dr. Vargas, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
You started off your career receiving a bachelor's in music from Radcliffe College. Then you went on and you received a master's degree from Columbia University. And then I'm assuming you were a teacher after that time and later went on to earn your PhD from the University of Pittsburgh. Do I have that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So when you were a teacher, what was your teaching experience? Were you a music teacher?
No, unfortunately. Right after graduating, I went to New York City, which is where everybody who's interested in music goes, or did anyway in those days. And the first job I got was teaching third grade in a private girls' school called Spence School in New York City. And while I was there, that's when I enrolled in the music education program at Columbia. And after about a year, the idea was I was going to become the director of the school in music, but I never did get a job in music.
I see. And you continued along the path of being a teacher then?
Yes. Well, what happened is I met my husband in 1961, and in 1962 we were married, and we moved to Pittsburgh. That made it a little difficult to be the music director in New York City. So I gave that up and I looked for a job. I actually, interestingly enough, looked for a job in music, but I only used a phone book in those days. We didn't have all the nice stuff you have today. And so I sent my resume and applied to a bunch of places, and I got back answers like, "Thank you very much. We are a secretarial school and we do not have any music program." The only actual responses that I got that were interested said, "Well, if you had been a trumpet player, we might be interested, but we need somebody to lead the band on the football field, and viola doesn't quite qualify."
For the maybe one or two people in the audience that are very new to behavior analysis, they wouldn't recognize this, but you are the daughter of the eminent psychologist B.F. Skinner, and when you were a teacher, were you influenced directly by your father, or did you take your information from what you learned in college and set about to teach that way?
No, I was very close to my father. I spent a lot of time with him, and I learned a whole lot about shaping behavior and what and the importance of postcedents and all that. He taught me to shape our dog and things of that sort, and we had a lot of discussions. And actually, as you said, my major was in music at Radcliffe. And so I had no training for teaching. So I went to a Harvard-Newton summer program that was supposed to teach you to be a teacher. And they had, I remember very clearly, an assignment that said, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And I said, "Oh, yes, you can." And I wrote the fastest paper I've ever written, talking about all the different ways you could make sure that a horse would drink when you led it to water. So that I was definitely a behavior analyst at that point. I would not call my father a psychologist. I would call him a behavior scientist or a behaviorologist, but he never really fit in psychology because his analysis does not consider causes that are inside the organism. It's always interaction between, well, of course, your genetic endowment, but all your experiences since birth. But there's no mind or free will or personality or ego or superego that is causing behavior. And that's why psychology has never really liked his work, and you won't find it accurately presented in psychology texts. And it's also why the Association for Behavior Analysis was formed. It's why the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis and the Journal of Experimental Analysis of Behavior were formed. And none of his books have a psychology in the title.
That is a wonderful point. Recently, I submitted a paper, and in the paper, in the text, we referred to behavior analysis as we tried to use the word behaviorology, but the reviewers, two of them corrected us and actually kind of punished our behavior. So I should be very mindful that while many people try to lump in behavior analysis with psychology, if you are a natural scientist, then you immediately see that behavior analysis is a natural scientific approach to studying behavior, whereas in psychology, many psychologies are more of what's the word? I guess, to quote your father, cognitive psychology is creation science.
Well, I certainly go along with that.
Yeah, so that's a wonderful point. So,
yes.
Let me ask you this. When you went on to earn your degree at the University of Pittsburgh, what was that like? So you had a very strong behavioral background, and at the time when you were attending graduate school, were there people in the program that could nurture you, and or were you pretty much on your own in the program?
I was in educational research, which essentially was looking at statistical kinds of things that education still does. And so there wasn't anybody there except, of course, I had my husband. And that was critical to have one person that I could discuss things with, besides, of course, my father and his colleagues. But I didn't have any courses at all in behavior analysis that were in education. So I went over to the psychology department and enrolled in a course by Merle Moskovitz, who was a behavior analyst. And at the end of the first class, he called me up and another girl that I went with from education and said, I think I should tell you that education students do not do well in this course. And I said, is that supposed to be a warning or a challenge? And he said, take it as you wish. Well, what happened was he must have called over to my advisor, because I didn't drop the course. He must have called over to my advisor because the next class, he said, we define a positive reinforcer as a stimulus which increases the rate of responding at which it follows. Wouldn't you agree? And he looked to me. I was terribly embarrassed, but now I'm much more assertive. But in those days, I was not as assertive. And that whole semester, he kind of checked with me as if I knew anything. But by then, I had read Walden too, and I had read the first 3 chapters of Science and Human Behavior, and that was it. Now, I had a lot of the practical techniques, which I actually used in my 3rd grade, and the textbook that I wrote, Behavior Analysis for Effective Teaching, has the description of the timing contingency that I used with the 3rd graders, and I did a lot of stuff with the 4th grade course the class that I taught when we moved to Pittsburgh, which was in a blue-collar neighborhood, which was a big contrast in terms of the clientele, but not in terms of how kids learn. So anyway, that's what happened, and that's where I got my first training in behavior analysis, was in Merle Moskowitz's course, which, by the way, I did get an A in.
Of course.
Although I did a statistical analysis for my dissertation, it was what I did was an item analysis of 250 people taking a test, and I used the usual item analysis techniques and showed that if you are constructing a criterion reference test, where you're looking at mastery, degree of mastery, versus a norm reference test where you're trying to actually spread out individuals as much as possible so you can pick the ones that are at the top, that the item analysis they are absolutely wrong for mastery degree, where you want to see an item that differentiates between pre-test and post-test, not just spreading out people on the post-test. It was actually a behavioral dissertation, even though it was statistical.
So you go on and receive your degree, and then you look for a job. Is that is your first job at the West Virginia?
Well, before I got my degree, I got a job at the American Institutes for Research. I had 1 year of teaching 4th grade, and I was complaining because I was bringing home papers and to grade in the evening, and I was trying to support Ernie because he was in the graduate program, and he said, you don't have to teach. And I thought, well, so actually I looked to see what was available, and this other job it was a 9-to-5 job. And in that I learned how to write programmed instruction, and my job was to write program instruction for pharmaceutical salesman Eli Lilly at Eli Lilly. So I learned a lot about diuretic drugs. But anyway, so I was still a graduate, and then that's when I went back to graduate school, because now I didn't have anything to do with my evening. I didn't have to grade all those papers. So then Ernie got a job offer at West Virginia, and neither of us had finished our degrees. And so we went down and started teaching before we had finished our degrees, which I don't recommend, by the way, because it took us a long time to get around to finishing the dissertations and defending.
Yes, that's very good advice. Most people that leave a program ABD, the statistics are grim in regards to how many people actually finish.
Yeah, well, we eventually did.
And you went on, both of you went on to have incredibly productive careers. You were in educational psychology,
Yes, that was the department.
So you worked with a number of students, and what were the classes that you taught in your career?
I started out teaching a course called Theories of Learning. And that was an eye-opener to me, because I had studied theories of learning, of course, as an educational research person, student, but they were all descriptions. They were not the people themselves. So when I taught it, I thought, well, if we're going to study Spence, we read Spence. If we're going to study Thorndike, we read Thorndike. If we're going to study Tolman, we read Tolman. So I found materials by these people, and it was an eye-opener, because the secondary sources often leave out a few things. For example, Thorndike had a whole bunch of different boxes and a whole bunch of different cats, and his so-called trial and error. First of all, it was a trial format. It wasn't free operant. You couldn't have done a precision teaching with it, because you couldn't make the cat couldn't get out until he was stuck in again. But a couple of the cats never did get out in the 3 or 4 hours that they left them in there. And so much for trial and error learning. It's sort of like trial and error learning. You want someone to swim, you throw the 2-year-old in the middle of a swimming pool, and most of them will make it to the side, and that's trial and error learning, not good shaping. So anyway, but that was that course I taught. Then I taught statistics courses, and it was straight statistics that I taught, but I had fun with them. I brought Legos and a huge bag of Legos, and we drew out individual Legos and did estimates of what the population was like, and that was kind of fun. And then I taught what's now called, well, it's single subject research, which I prefer to call repeated measures research, because sometimes it's not single subject, it's a whole class you're using. I taught that a lot. I taught it with counseling students, and that was interesting, because counselors are very much interested in working with one person at a time. You don't have 30 people and split them into suicidal types that you're going to help and suicidal types that you're going to use as a control. There's no way you're going to do that. It would be totally unethical. So they were very open to it. And I had a good time with that course. And it was the course that finally, after about 15 years, I decided that their grades should be, this was a fall course, their grades should be finished by Thanksgiving, and that there was one class after Thanksgiving, and that would be a conference. So I made conference programs. I brought in conference coffee and goodies, and I asked them to dress like a conference and to present. And there was no credit available for it, but they spent a lot of time making wonderful presentations. And I said, this is very low stress. If you really screw up, it doesn't matter, because nothing is depending on it, but it gives you experience of having presented. that was a sensation, and I recommend anybody who's teaching with projects do that. Have an official conference session as your final class. So I had a good time with that. I taught behavior analysis with a lot of practicing teachers, and they all did projects in their classrooms, of course, and that was great. And I think that's about, verbal behavior. Ernie and I split verbal behavior into, we think it takes a little longer than one semester to cover the whole book, and to teach it takes even longer than covering. So we split it into 2 semesters. I took the first semester through chapter 12, and he took the second semester, which was the rest of the book plus applications.
If only I could have been a student in that class. That sounds wonderful.
Well, don't feel bad, because when we went to West Virginia, neither Ernie nor I had read the book. And after about a year there, we thought, we really should we should read this book, but it's tough. So we had a volunteer seminar, and it had 3 faculty members and 2 students, and we met once a week. And we said, well, how many pages do you think we can do this week? And we picked a number, and then we would come back a week later and discuss it. And that's how I got through verbal behavior. It's not something that's easy to pick up on your own, and particularly if you haven't read and thoroughly understood science and human behavior.
I'm glad to hear you say that. When I was a master's student, I first read that book, and I made it through the class, but I didn't feel I really understood it. Then I read it again as a doctoral student, and then I've had seminars. So I've probably read that book about 6 times, and I've read different people. Norm Peterson has this wonderful program,
Yes.
Text, that reading that most recently has really helped solidify. And but when you do come to the understanding of what's in that work, you recognize just what a masterpiece it is, and how incredibly useful, and just what a contribution it is.
Yes, it is. It is an amazing extension of the basic lab principles that were thoroughly validated into how people communicate. Very, very sophisticated. It really is very sophisticated analysis, because, again, it does not rely on you having ideas that you're communicating. What you say is shaped by a verbal community that reinforces specific verbal utterances and specific situations. It's amazing. That's why it's so useful in the field of autism, of course.
In your career, you have been you've educated a number of students, and you've taught directly about behavior analysis, but you've also been you've been an ambassador of behavior analysis, effective education. We'll get into precision teaching soon, but you've had the chance to see the development of behavior analysis, and from your perspective, where do you see the technology or the science going? You've probably having the perspective of looking at behavior analysis from the 60s, 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and up till now. What's your take on how society has embraced it, how education? I mean, that's a pretty big question, but what are your what's your impression on where we've been and where we're going?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that just because a science is valid, works, is true, is a correct description of how the world works, does not necessarily mean that that science will persist, or at least not initially. If you think about other sciences and how during the Dark Ages they sort of disappeared, then you understand that it's important that there are enough people keeping the science alive to have it continue. And here, I really credit the applied people. It's the people who are using the science and finding that it works that are keeping the science alive. It's very clear from the point of view of the B.S. Skinner Foundation, where we send out books of verbal behavior, that verbal behavior is our best-selling book. And why? Because it is used so extensively in the field of autism, where you can't use talk therapy if kids are not talking. So first of all, I'd like to credit the practitioners with keeping the science alive. And I'm in a kind of unusual position because I go back and forth between the precision teaching people, even the direct instruction people, general applied behavior analysis. I sort of have a foot in all the different camps. Probably autism the least, because I've never worked with a student with autism, although I've read a lot. And so I think that there is a whole world opening up right now in the field of apps. The teaching machine movement kind of failed because people, first of all, no machine maker wanted to produce a machine until there were programs to run on it. And nobody wanted to write a program until there was a machine that would present it or use it. And now we have the terrific precision teaching devices. And right now, I think that the stuff that the prison teachers are doing, where you have pretty much randomized items and you bring mastery up to fluency, so that you're not only doing you're not only getting things right, you're doing it quickly without a whole lot of thinking involved and so forth. Automaticity, as the educators called it. So that, I think, the fact that apps can do that, and there are so many math programs, for example, out there that use fluency, is going to be very good for the precision teachers. There are a lot of apps that are looking at the consequences of behavior. David Friedman wrote an article for The Atlantic on recently in 2013 about weight loss. Well, the problem with weight is that the immediate consequences, taste, are always very powerful, and the long-range consequences, which is weight loss and whatever, health, longevity, whatever, are quite far in the future. So what you need, if you're going to shape up eating celery instead of candy or something like that, you need some immediate consequences. So some of the apps now are building in social networks, which let you say, I just brush my teeth, and when I brush my teeth, I don't eat after dinner. And then you get 16 messages back saying, good for you. That's a good idea. I think I'll try that too. Or in his case, he was talking about stepping on a scale. You put your weight into this app, and people say, if you went up, they say, oh, well, just try again today. You'll do better tomorrow, and so forth. Just getting some social feedback, which is very important. So I think we're just in a place where behavior analysis can explode. And from what we see in the B.S. Skinner Foundation, it is exploding overseas. We're getting a lot of interaction with overseas. And in fact, we just We have five. The foundation has 5 board members, and one of them is from Norway, Per Holt. Try to make it more international.
Mm-hmm. How did you come to precision teaching?
Ogden Lindsley came to West Virginia University and gave a short course, and I was convinced. So I used precision teaching to get myself to jog regularly, which I did for about 37 years, and then decided, because my mother had problems with her knees, that I would go just to walking, which I still do, or bike riding, which I hope to do soon. And I just thought it was great. I mean, it's clear that in a science you have to have at least 3 things. You have to have a very clear dependent variable, which in Skinner's case was rate, which is number per unit time. Precision people I know like to call it frequency, but in any case, it's always number per unit of time. You have to have a theoretical basis, because that's how you interpret your results, which Skinner did too. And you have to have procedures that can be applied, and of course the science, Skinnerian science. If you don't like behaviorology, you can call it Skinnerian science. Has that too.
As someone who has talked a lot about precision teaching and has written about precision teaching, one of the questions that frequently comes up to precision teachers is, well, why do you have to use that chart? How do you respond to people when they ask you that question?
Well, I don't think I've been asked a lot. I have certainly used it in my all my classes. All my classes did flashcards, including the verbal behavior class, and we graphed it on precision teaching graphs, although I tended to use the 1-minute school chart instead of the full chart, just because it's much easier for somebody who doesn't understand decimals to use. And I guess I would say it's the best chart if you want to really see how much improvement is occurring day by day or week by week, and not exaggerating the performance of your best students and making the performance of your lowest students look lousy. Because if you really think about it, the ones that really need the feedback of seeing themselves improve are your slowest students, not your fast ones. But I don't know that I would convince anybody. I think what I always did when I taught it was make sure they have some data first. Then you introduce the chart so they can see what it looks like. And it makes more sense if you know what the data are and you plot them than if you introduce the chart with some fictitious data or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I generally that is very good advice. When people are charting, I think that especially if it's their own behavior, it creates a certain investment in the process. And in fact, this ties into what you were just saying. There's a whole movement, and it's relatively new, which people call it the quantized self, which refers to all of these people measuring all of these different behaviors with apps. People, they're measuring their weight, their fitness, and even now there's such sensitivity that you can hook up, you can measure some very things that you couldn't do in the past. For example, your blood pressure, your heart rate, how many, all of these things can just be measured and given. And so if that can be put on, different displays and the feedback can be given to the person, I think That really ties into what you're saying, where this is an avenue for behavior analysts, for precision teachers, for people that are into creating effective change for society. This is a wonderful way to reach out to a group of people that may not have otherwise heard about these things that we're talking about.
Yes, I think that's absolutely true. My only concern is that very often they use the principles, but they have no idea where they came from. They don't know that they came from a science and that the science is there and has a lot of other features. So, but that's, that's the B.F. Skinner Foundation talking and daughter of talking. What do you expect?
So my job is to work with special education teachers, and I also work with general education teachers. And if you were talking to, let's say you were giving my teachers, or just teachers in general, you were the speaker of a commencement address, and it was your job to give these teachers advice. What advice would you give them as they go out into the teaching world?
Well, I don't know what I would do in that situation. I'm more comfortable with practicing teachers. Mm-hmm. And I used to give workshops when my book Behavioral Objectives came out. I was asked to give workshops for large numbers of teachers who were very mad about having to write behavioral objectives. And so what I really did was to start out by saying, I'm sure you've heard a lot of things about behavioral objectives, complaints, and so forth. I'd like you to write down 5 of them, and I put them in groups to do this, and then answer them. And the interesting thing is that the people that would be the spokesperson for each of the groups of teachers did such a much better job than I could. And also, of course, they couldn't say, oh, well, you just don't know our school. So I guess what I would say is that when you go out, as Einstein said, it isn't the answer that's important, it's the question. So I guess I would say, when you get into your classroom, think about what would help students learn, what would help you do a better job. Ask questions, have your students ask questions. And then once you have a good question, start taking data and try something. I had one student that had a consequence, which was to stand up, turn around, and sit down. And this was a positive consequence, believe it or not. And I thought that'll never work. And of course, it worked just fine. So, don't have preconceptions about what will work or what will not. Although, of course, you use the science if you possibly can think of something that would have the appropriate contingencies. Certainly do that. And timers are wonderful too. If you have a child who's taking too long to get ready for school, too long to go to bed, if you set a timer with some consequence for beating it, like, if you get ready before the time rings, you get you can pick out a book to read or whatever. It's magical. Timing is magical. Another advantage of precision teaching, by the way. Yeah, I have another story about precision teaching, actually. Yes. And that is, I had a class of, well over 30 students, and we did flashcards at the beginning of every class. And, it wasn't flashcards. They were sheets with huge numbers of problems on them. Which is most behaviorally stated out of 4. and they had to circle them. Well, one day this special education teacher comes in and she said, I'm sorry, I can't do it this morning. I had the most awful thing happen. And I said, what happened? And she said, I was coming here, and one of my kids that I work with was on the other side of the street and started running over to come to me and was hit by a car. And I said, oh, my goodness, that is something awful. Was the child all right? Yes, it was. It wasn't serious, but I just can't do anything. And I said, I tell you what, sit down and I'll give you the paper like everybody else, and we'll start the timer. And so if you would go sit down, please. So she did. Started the timer. By the time the precision teaching exercise was over, which was like 1 minute, she was fine. She'd settle down. She'd come under the stimulus control of the current situation, no longer upset, no longer unable to participate as a full class member. Timing is amazing.
Yes. There's so much to learn, and that's the beauty of science. And I also thinking back to what you said earlier about the camp mentality, that you have people in the precision teaching camp, people in the direct instruction camp. I like to think of everything in terms of just science, and if people look at it that way, then it helps us all come to a common way of doing things that will help benefit us, and it will also help us ask these interesting questions. For example, with timing, that's not necessarily something the precision teachers own. That could be a very interesting question in a number of different contexts.
And the immediate consequences is something that the clicker trainers and tag teachers thought of. And now, as I understand it, tag teachers and precision teachers have gotten together. You typically don't do either precision teaching or tag teaching for more than 5 or 10 minutes in a class period because they're very intense. At least I never did. Mm-hmm. Do you? I mean, do you end it?
Yeah. No, that's the way that I've always done things, is that you have short, if you call it a session, you would do your certain trials within that session, and once it's done, and you move on to other things.
Right. It gives you the idea to do the time to do more creative things, good problem-solving exercises, and so forth. I remember reading about one school where they had kids rent their desks, and there were better desks and more beat up desks, and they learned to all about counting and numbers and so forth by renting their desk. I did a project in a high school once. A teacher was complaining that her teachers were her kids were unrealistic. These were kids from poor backgrounds, and they all thought they were going to be either football players or musicians and earn millions of dollars, and she was concerned about their being totally unrealistic about the future. So we put together a little unit where we got real estate pictures for houses all around Morgantown, and Sears Roebuck catalogs, which they had in those days, a bunch of catalogs. Now you'd use the internet, of course. And and then, of course, the Bureau of U.S. government statistics on how much you could earn with various different professions, averages, and so forth. And most of these kids were not planning to go on after high school. And so we looked at, well, how much could you make? And then they started to try to buy a house, and they looked at, well, what's the mortgage rates and so forth and so on. And it was an eye-opener. I mean, they realized very quickly for the kinds of lives they thought they were going to live, they certainly couldn't do it as a gas station attendant or a McDonald's hamburger server. And we didn't have checks. If I were to do it again, I would have them have a checkbook and have to write checks for things. We let them get married. If they wanted to work with someone else and buy a house together, they could do that. But needless to say, there was a lot of enthusiasm, but also a lot of reality checking. I love doing projects where kids are getting really involved in something that really has to do with their own future.
I hope that everyone listens to this interview, well, all my interviews, but one of the things that I've really enjoyed about speaking with you is the science of behavior, which is behavior analysis, has unfortunately been given a bad rap, and there are people out there that just do not understand it and will make patently absurd claims like, oh, it's all about, X, and they'll just try to reduce it to some very basic, like stimulus response, or they'll say something that is just completely inane or incorrect. But yet, our conversation, you've been able to show how this technology, this science, is used to help people, how it's used to help engineer a better society, and everything that you've been talking about is just very inspiring to me, because this is what I feel the science is about. We have a science, and we can use that science to uncover very important information and use it to better ourselves and to move forward. So I really wanted to thank you for just sharing that message, because I think people that listen to this podcast are attracted to precision teaching because it does have a scientific basis, but also not just it being scientific, it's a helping profession.
Yes, and it's all about contingencies. If you want to look at anything you want to teach, you have to look at what are the contingencies that you want. What are the situations in which the behavior is going to occur, and what are the natural consequences, and build those in as much as possible. And precision teaching at least has the fluency aspect, which is so critical for being effective in any endeavor. I'm a musician, I still play viola, and I do backwards chaining and precision teaching with the difficult spots in the orchestra music. And it's just wonderful.
So you're still playing. How much do you practice, would you say?
Not much, about 20 minutes a day.
Aha. But you're still practicing.
Sometimes up to an hour.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on whether it's a very busy time or not. Yeah, you have to practice. I mean, I do. Some of the people in the orchestra don't. They're very, very good. In fact, we have in the orchestra, it's just a volunteer orchestra. You don't even have to try out to get in. You just come. But we had one of the double basses used to be in the Boston Philharmonic.
Wow.
And he does not have to practice. But I do.
Well, we are towards the end of our interview. Are there any questions I should have asked you, or is there anything else that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Well, as I said, again, just, the whole thing it's a contingency analysis, and it's very powerful. It's the way the world works. And if you use the principles, you're going to be more effective.
Well,
and they're fun.
Yes.
Behaviorists have fun too, shaping animals to do fun things just for fun.
Anyone that has yet to experience the joy of a chicken camp, I strongly recommend it because you're right. It is great fun working with chickens, shaping them, and we have excellent people that do that. Terry Ryan out at Squim and
Yes.
Karen Pryor in Boston. There's just wonderful technology that's out there.
Yeah, the foundation's going to post some of the just fun projects. Per Holt has a rat playing White Christmas. Little bits of it, of course, not the whole thing, but there are actually correct phrasings that the rats are doing, just for fun.
Well, Dr. Vargas, thank you so much for your time and for this very informative interview, and thank you for all the work you do on behalf of everyone who's trying to use behavior analysis to shape a better society.
Well, it's because of all you people that it makes it worthwhile to do the kinds of things I do. If I didn't feel that other people could use some of the things, then there wouldn't be no point. So it's all of you people who are out there every day that are really the critical ones, I think, for the future of the science. So I thank you, and I had a good time.
Okay. Thank you for joining the Precision Teaching Podcast.
My pleasure.
And that was our interview with Dr. Vargas. I hope that you all enjoyed it as much as I did. Well, Doug and Carrie, we are towards the end of the show. Do you all have any parting comments, thoughts, ideas, feedback from our Welcome Back show?
I look forward to the next Precision Teaching podcast, and I hope that we get some cool questions. And don't forget to submit some chart shares. Little plug there.
Yeah, I second that plug.
The podcast
journal.
If you're listening to this podcast, I suppose you may or may not know this, but there are two places where you can download this. We are on iTunes. All you have to do is go to the iTunes store and search for Precision Teaching. If you'd like to get the podcast that way, you can. Or, of course, if you go to the website, which is another place that you may be at right now, you can listen to our show, you can download the show. But both ways you can hear us. Well, on behalf of Doug Kostowitz and Carrie Millico, I'm Rick Abina, and I thank you for listening to the Precision Teaching Podcast.